In your opinion, has America lost a generation of black boys? Please explain.
Absolutely. America has lost a generation. Actually, they've lost more than a generation, and in my opinion, based on my experience. The primary reason for those losses is what's commonly known as PIC, the prison industrial complex. Statistical data is out there to confirm that 1 of every 4 black males in this country is involved some way, shape, form, or fashion in the criminal justice system between the ages of 18 and 35. Those are prime years for any man in this society. You're going from your teenage years until adult. You're starting to do those responsible things, quote unquote, getting an education, getting your career, finding Miss Right, raising a family, so on and so forth. So to answer your question, yes. And what people fail to admit, well, some fail to admit and some are in denial about, and that is that this is not just, when we talk about the prison industrial complex and its impact on our people, we're not just talking about a few bad apples somewhere in positions of power. We're talking about a systemic process that works at every level from the United States government right down to the local jail, which I can show you within 15, 20 feet from here. I see it twice a week here. We transport people in custody twice a week. I've been here in this office 6 years. 90% of the people that I've seen transport have been people who look like me. That's not a coincidence. That's by design. Magnify that as many times as you need to, then you get a picture.
I'm going to read a quote from Reverend W. Wilson Good Sr. It's from the PhillyTrib.com website. He says, "I think the prison industrial complex is nothing short of the second coming of slavery for African Americans. The nation seems to rather incarcerate than educate. I don't think there is any research that, when given a proper environment, African American males cannot learn and achieve." Your thoughts, please.
I agree with Mr. Good. If he's the same Good I'm thinking about, is that the former mayor of Philadelphia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Let me share something with your viewers that they may not be aware of as it relates to the prison industrial complex and slavery. Contrary to what many may believe, slavery was not outlawed or abolished in the United States by the passage of the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment reads, and I quote, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." What that says and what that means, slavery has not been abolished. It says that if you have been convicted of a crime, we have a right to put you in these iron houses, because that's what they are, and make you work and not pay you, or pay you the pittance. I think the latest statistic is $1.25 an hour for the so-called good jobs there. Harry Blackburn, former Supreme Court Justice, took it a step further because he realized prison industrial complex was a harsh term. So he wanted to change the name, and this is the term that he wanted to change it to: factories with fences. Now, factories with fences, okay? Now, what most people fail to understand when we talk about the prison industrial complex, we're talking about not just the person who's there doing the time. Families are impacted, children are impacted, the socio-economic globe is tilted on its axis, that's the type of impact that it has. So for those who are under the impression that their law and order is the order of the day, they have an ulterior motive for that. You know, one of the most amazing things to me, former President Bill Clinton, we have some among us who foolishly called him the first black president, yet under his watch, more of our people were incarcerated at the federal and state level than any president in American history.
Yep.
And yet, because he put on sunglasses and played a bad saxophone, in my opinion, all of a sudden he's a brother.
Yeah.
Are we that naive? Apparently so.
In your opinion, what's the best way to raise black boys?
The best way to raise black boys is to ensure, as individuals and as a society, that we do all that we can to keep the family structure together. The statistics out there when we talk about the number of single head of household females that's run by black females, the numbers are staggering. The last figures I saw, 60% to 75% of black households in America are headed by a single female. So that begs the question, where's the father? We've already talked about where a lot of them are, but there are some who will abandon their family, not because of a lack of love. They will abandon their family because, having been raised by a father themselves, the vast majority of them, they understand the importance of having a father there. And because they can't hold up the mantle of the father, they'll just leave out of shame and pity rather than stay there and suffer. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is that we have a system called welfare, where the system comes in and say, well, I will take care of you, young lady, and your children, but you can't allow him in the house. You know, years ago, they had welfare investigators who would come, look under your bed, in your closet, and if you wanted to have your benefits terminated, let them find a man there. Again, systemic behavior. This is not aberrational behavior. This is systemic, and it's designed that way. And one of the reasons, brother, that it's designed that way is, other than the fact that we are still an unbowed people, we're unbowed to the dominant culture in the system. We're unbowed, and because we're unbowed, they're trying to come up with ways to break us. We refuse to assimilate in a manner that's comfortable for our enemy.
With the strict and tight regulations one has to tolerate when labeled as a felon, doesn't this increase the rate of recidivism?
Absolutely. Case in point, over the last 12 months, I've worked with 2 or 3 young men, and I'll use one story in particular. A young man was 25 years old. He sat right in this office. He went away. He did 4 years in state prison for selling cocaine. He was sent to me through a friend, acquaintance of mine, sent him here because career development is also part of what I do. Just as a courtesy, my way of giving back. And we worked together, and I had him positioned so that he was this close to getting a job. His parole officer violated him because he wasn't able to get a job quick enough, which means he went back into the system. And the last I heard, he's back in state prison now, finishing up his original sentence. What's wrong with that is that here was a young man who was a very organized drug dealer. I remember his case. He had a crew, and he sat, and I said to him, I said, have you ever thought about entrepreneurship? He said, what's that? I explained entrepreneurship. I said, you already have all the requisites that you need. I explained to him what requisites were. I said, you understood product acquisition, you understood distribution, you sure as heck understood security, you understood marketing, you understand all of these things. So why not look at this and think about a way to develop this? I was asked to sit on a panel at Mercer College a few years ago, and I'm hoping to develop the concept later, hustlenomics, because that's what came to mind. But again, the parole officers and those who have charge over them, they're given quotas. They're given very small boundary lines to work within. So he ended up getting violated. So the only thing that happens, he'll come out, he'll be a little older, and that felony conviction will go with him to his grave, unfortunately. And it creates more and more opportunity for him to reoffend, because we all have to eat. Everybody has to bring bread to their table. And in a country of plenty, sometimes people have to do the wrong thing for the right reason.
I'm going to read another paragraph here from the Michelle Alexander article. Excuse me. She writes, "The drug war has been brutal, but those who live in white communities have little clue to the devastation wrought. This war has been waged almost exclusively in poor communities of color, even though studies consistently show that people of all colors use and sell illegal drugs at remarkably similar rates. In fact, some studies indicate that white youth are significantly more likely to engage in illegal drug dealing than black youth. White youth, for example, have about 3 times the number of drug-related visits to the emergency room as their African American counterparts. It doesn't seem that you get any type of forgiveness once declared a felon. In these situations, does it make it easier for the community to disavow any type of human sentiment or compassion for these people, since they've been presented to the community as animals or something not worthy of forgiveness?"
It does make it easier for the community to disassociate and to disavow reasons for interacting with them. You see, it's my belief and my experience that before you can ostracize an individual or a group of individuals, in this case convicted felons, you have to first demonize them. The felony conviction in and of itself demonizes them. Society or the system doesn't have to do anything else. If you don't believe it, stop 3 out of every 4 people you see, the next 3 or 4 people you see when you walk out of this building, ask them, what are your thoughts about someone with a felony conviction? And they'll give you a litany of things that they think that these people are. So the felony conviction is the tag, it's the label that's become a yoke of oppression for them that unfortunately most of them have to wear until they draw their last breath. So I absolutely believe that the relationship between the felony conviction and ostracizing people within the community, and when we say the community, I'm talking about all segments of the community, because the tentacles of the communities can reach in a lot of places. And it's incumbent upon those of us who care about this population, who are willing to do something, is to help them to create alternatives to their particular situation. And one of the ways that I know that that can be done is through social entrepreneurship. And perhaps at another time that's something we can delve into a little deeper.
Sure.
Time allowing.
Please speak to your experience or experiences working in the Greenberg Drug Court.
As I said earlier, I was recruited for this position about 6 years ago. Some of the town officials, in particular two of the three judges here, decided to develop a drug court, and they were able to secure the funding to start the program, implementation funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice. And 2 or 3 people had been put in the position before, but they weren't able to get the program off and running. So I was recruited specifically for this position. And what I've discovered in the short time that I've been here, and having worked in the criminal justice system in other areas, is this system of justice and the way it's meted out here is no different than it is anywhere else, because I stand in that courtroom day in and day out, and I can see how conditioning has impacted the decision makers, so much so that whenever a certain person comes and stands before the bar of justice, and I use that term loosely, what happens is there are some preconceived notions and decisions are made based on those, on what they perceive. What else I found interesting, I do more work with young blacks coming in and out of this court than I do with the actual drug court itself. The drug court is just an alternative to incarceration program for people who've admitted and have been identified as substance abusers. However, what I find is a lot of the young blacks in particular, they simply lack direction. They simply lack information. They simply lack the guidance that's necessary so that these doors does not become revolving doors for them. See, they a lot of times they don't understand that they understand intellectually, but it doesn't have a visceral impact on them, and they don't know how to ask for help. So I reach out to them, and I'll say, hey brother, come in, let me talk to you for a minute. And as a result, I can show them how to access services in this community that will allow them to do the things that's necessary so that they can improve their quality of life and their station in life. So my experience has been, in a nutshell, the term justice, when I think about it, it means just us more than it does any other group of people.
I'm going to read another paragraph, a few sentences from the article by Michelle Alexander talking about President Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Clinton's quote-unquote tough-on-crime policies resulted in the largest increase in federal and state prison inmates of any president in American history.
Mm-hmm.
But Clinton was not satisfied with exploding prison populations. He and the quote-unquote New Democrats championed legislation banning drug felons from public housing, no matter how minor the offense, and denying them basic public benefits, including food stamps, for life. Discrimination in virtually every aspect of political, economic, and social life is now perfectly legal, if you're labeled a felon. These laws seek to punish forever. Again, there is no forgiveness here. Someone could have a drug offense at the age of 22, and it could keep them could keep them down and out when they're well into their 40s and 50s. Is there some sort of systematical oppressive scheme at play here?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. If you think back, for those of us who've lived long enough, Malcolm taught us about systems and how systems can work for us and against us. Example being, if you create certain conditions, then a man or woman is only left with a few options. With the felony conviction, you've already taken away a lot of his or her civil rights. Add on that, you're impacting their housing. You've impacted their employment. Looking around this society of plenty, what else is left to do? You've backed that person into a corner, and now you've said to them, I've stripped you of everything that you need in order to be able to sustain yourself and grow as an individual. So now you're going to have to figure a way out. But there is no way out. There is no other door. The only way you can go is back to what you've done, because that's what you're familiar with. That's what you're most comfortable with, because you've taken away all other options that should be available. So absolutely, it's very systemic, it's diabolical, and it needs to be changed.
Talking about our young black boys, our young black men, many of these boys need to be properly educated in order to pursue a better lifestyle, etc. If someone were to open a charter school for these boys, and assuming it would be run right, would that make a difference for these boys, in your opinion?
I believe it would. And the reason I believe it, one of the reasons I believe it would, is we have to rethink education and how we look at education. We have to rethink and really observe how people learn. People learn different ways. We all know about the visual learners, those who can learn by doing, but we have to be able to be creative enough to be able to identify the best ways, methods, and means that little Johnny, for example, can learn, as opposed to how little Joey can learn, and then find a way to mesh that so that we can have a cohesive, comprehensive teaching tool and system. That's what's missing. We talk about education and its value, yet at the federal and state government, irregardless of who goes into office, when they talk about making cuts, it's always the most vulnerable among us. They cut education and they cut health care. And the measure of a real democratic society is, if you look at how they treat their children and their elders, that'll tell you what that society is all about.
Doesn't seem a good thing about the American society. Right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
In your opinion, is there a need for introspection in the African American community?
Of course. It's always healthy to be willing to be introspective, because we live from inside out, not outside in. So the more we look in here, the more we'll recognize where we need to go, when we need to go, and how we need to go. So absolutely, without introspection, there's no real progress, because you can't be afraid to look in the place where you really live, because we all live within here. We live inside out, not outside in.
We're in the home stretch here.
All right.
I'm going to talk a piece about pop culture for a second with our youth. How in the world did we arrive at a place where prison life is glorified?
Wow.
In your opinion, of course.
When I think about, I'll give you an example. About 2 or 3 years ago, and I live here in Westchester County, and I was walking down the street. I was by myself, and I ran into 3 young brothers between the ages of 15 and 18. And they had no belts, no laces in their sneakers, and the brother had on a do-rag, and his pants hanging down. And after I got my nerve up, because I knew that I could have been stepping in real dangerous territory. I could have got my brains blown out, actually. But anyway, I summoned the courage that I needed, and I stopped him. I said, "Excuse me, brother." I said, "May I ask you a question?" I said, "Before I ask, I'm asking because I'm ignorant and I don't know. So I want to know. I'm trying to learn something." They said, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "Explain to me why you don't have a belt, your pants are hanging down, and you don't have any laces in your sneakers." And the three of them looked at each other in amazement. Then they looked at me. And one of them, who I assume was the leader of the little group, as I said, there was three of them, he said, "I don't know, man." Then his partner chimed in, "Well, it's a jail thing, man." I said, "Yeah, but you're out here, brother. We're all out here, standing here on this particular corner. You can go anywhere you want from here. I can go anywhere. Nobody's going to tell me what time to go to the bathroom, what time to go to bed." So I said, "Why would you want to mimic jail behavior?" And I realized when I looked in their eyes, they wanted to have an answer, but they really didn't have one, because I may have been the first, or one of the first men or people who had the courage to even ask them that, because they had an intimidating look. But although I'm sitting down, I'm a big man myself, so perhaps that was my biggest asset at the time. And I said to them, "If I told you something, can I teach you something about wearing your pants hanging down and where that came from?" I said, "If you don't want to listen," I said, "I'll go my way." He said, no, it's cool, go ahead." So I knew I at least had their attention. I said, "Do you realize at one time our ancestors, probably your great-great-great-grandfather and probably my great-great-great-grandfather, when we were in chattel slavery, the master, who was a Caucasian, took our belts from the men because they were afraid that they would try to escape." I said, "Think about it. How far do you think you can run if you don't have a belt and your pants hanging down?" I said, "You may make it a half a block." I said, "But eventually your pants are going to fall down and you're going to trip up." I said, "That was a device that was used by those who had charge over us back in slavery to keep us from escaping." And they said, "Wow, man, I never knew that." They wanted to counter that. So my point is, pop culture, how we look at it and how we treat it, and I said to this when we were off camera before we started, we have to do more listening. And we have to do listening in a manner where children know that we're listening. Because the one thing I give today's youth is their perception is much more developed than it was when I was their age.
Very sharp, yes.
And I have a great deal of respect for that. Just one more quick point on that. I really realized that 2 summers ago, I have a nephew who just graduated from Coastal Carolina University last year. He got his bachelor's degree. And he was up 2 summers ago, and my wife and I had helped him get a job. And it was his day off. We were sitting in our living room, and we were just talking. And I said to him one day, I said, "You know, when I was your age, we actually had to get up to change the channel on the TV." And brother, this kid fell out in the middle of the living room floor, my hand to God. He laughed so hard he was in tears. He said, "Come on, Uncle Charles, get out of here with that." I said, "I'm telling you the truth. His name is Julius." I said, "Julius, when I was your age, we actually had to get up to change the channel." And he was, after he gathered himself, the kid was laughing. Tears were flowing because he thought I had made it up. And afterwards, I sat and I thought, wow, his reality is that since he came on this planet, he's not had the opportunity to see something as ancient as that, because everything has been remote control. Mm-hmm. But what it did, it taught me a lesson. And I'm still learning, and I'm getting better at listening to our youth and trying to understand the pop culture. And like anything else, what can I extract that's wholesome, constructive, and positive that can benefit those who are in the middle of it? Because in a lot of ways, brother, I'm glad I grew up when I did.
Me too.
Because it's tough being a young person.
It's scary being a young person.
I never forget that.
Mm-hmm.
I never forget that.
Final question. In your opinion, have we moved beyond race in this country?
Absolutely not, brother. In spite of who sits in the White House now, absolutely not. Our enemies would like for us to think so. And because a few people are able to do well, a few people of color are able to do well, for me, the gauge is always the same. What's happening for the masses? And I think Professor Alexander alluded to, well, she didn't allude to, she wrote it in one of the pieces that I read, where she talked about economically, when you look at statistics and real dollars and real value, and look at changes that have or have not taken place, we're at the same place, if not in a worse place than we were when Dr. King walked among us in 1968. So, no, we have by no means gone beyond race and its impact. And I tell you, you know, one of my mentors, and he's up in years now, Dr. Yosef Ben-Yana, affectionately known as Dr. Ben, taught us a lot about not only who we are, but from whence we come, from whence we came. And the late Dr. John Henry Clark, he too was able to try to educate us and teach us some things about race. And interestingly enough, race was not something that was known among our ancestors until much later on. Race, pigmentation racialism is what I call it, having to do with the complexion of one's skin, determines how high they can climb in this society. That was not an issue at one time. It's not even something that we introduced into humanity, yet we're affected by it and afflicted by it more than any other people walking the planet.
True. Thank you.